This episode contains sensitive content. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Culture Podcast, where we uncover the hidden mechanics of high control groups, their tactics, and their impact. And we speak with the survivors who broke free. My name is Derek, and I'm your host.
My name is Trinity, and I'm also your host. On this podcast, we explore cult life as real people who have lived through the life-changing process of leaving a high control group.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is another solo interview. My co-host Trinity is not with us today. He's out for a little bit, but I'm really excited and I'm happy to have on someone that I just recently met, Micah Losh, like Josh.
Yes.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's a little insider. If you've read his book, you probably have your last name mispronounced here and there.
Oh, both of them. I get Micah Losh a lot.
Now, I did kind of spoil a little bit. You're an author. What I want to say is just from my initial, I've started reading your book, and not only your author, you're a poet, man.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
It's I don't know. It's really impressive. Like, your writing is very, you don't hold back, which I think is really great, and I think your writing style is very approachable too.
Thank you.
And so, not only am I liking the book, I hope that listeners check out your work. And obviously, we'll talk about that, the further we get along in our conversation. I wanted to read an excerpt from your book. Book's titled Mentally Diseased. And obviously, like I said, we'll get into that. But this is just a little tease, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. This is from the chapter called Physically Out, Mentally Out. Well, I don't know if you want to read. I might be doing it injustice, but we'll go for it.
Ah, yes. I remember writing this. Huddled masses amassed at mass, crowded gluttons a narrow path, muddled incantation, complete disintegration. This is my waste. What was my faith? Sycophant, my God, I can't. Me swing from rafters, burnt with straw, hanging worth on capricious laws. My waste, my faith. Sycophant, God, I can't. Obsequious and vicious, volatile and possible. Son, I'm not a prodigal. This waste, this faith. Sycophant, no, I can't. No, I can't.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm grateful that you read that instead of me.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure you would have done fine.
What were you thinking about when you wrote that? Where were you?
I was in jail during COVID. I wound up in there and I spent 77 days straight. And I had been drunk for a long time. I was in a bad marriage and I had wanted to leave it. But of course, everyone told me I had made a promise to my wife and Jehovah. And so when I was in jail, that was the first time I hadn't been drunk in years. And I wrote my mother a letter and I apologized for my behavior. And at the time, I thought maybe, I needed to get some intensive treatment. And I don't remember how many days later, but my mother filed a no contact order against me. Now, court was digital. And she told the judge, I read the statement, what a horrible man I was. And I remember he looked at me and he said, you're not to speak to your mother or send her Snapchats, which I thought was ridiculous. But I said, I have no issue never speaking to her again. And I knew that my mother was going to try and erase me from my son's life. And so I wrote that thinking about him, thinking about how all of the horrible things they had done to me, I feared might happen to him. And I actually wrote it to the theme of a heavy metal song that I like. But yeah, I that's the only thing I've ever written in jail. But I kept it, and now it's in a book. It was honestly kind of weird to read that. I haven't looked in that book for probably 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful for you to do that, man. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It's funny because I was like, I want to read this to kind of start the podcast, and then
Yeah.
yeah, just I was like, what am I thinking? I have the artist here. Let's
Well,
hear it from his own mouth. So I really appreciate that.
oh yeah, no worries. It's just it's surreal, I guess. It's not bad, it's just surreal.
Well, it's probably one of those things too, where it's like, man, sometimes the more work you do at your art, you also kind of can pick it apart, and it's you've gotten better to some extent at certain things, but
Yeah.
gosh, man, what a place to be, both mentally and physically to kind of express, your thoughts and feelings in that moment.
Yeah.
And it'll be here forever, you know. Really, really great.
Yeah.
It'll be on my shelf forever. So I appreciate you reaching out to come on the podcast because now I have another great author and book on my shelf.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me.
So I want to chat with you. One of the themes, as we were talking about before, that I have is, I like to have people on the podcast that, really, really we talk about, I don't know, their journey, kind of where they started, what they went through, and, more importantly, really where they're at now. We all have these life journeys, and, it's really unfortunate that some people haven't gotten to a better place. I don't want to say like a perfect or a good place, but I've gotten to a better place. But for every one of those people that maybe is still struggling, or just wanting people that they can relate to, I think this is a podcast that they can hopefully find. Just to have people that's like, no, we've all been through stuff, and we're willing to kind of share a little bit of our journey, and I think it's helpful. So yeah, so I'm really appreciative. So for you, what does it do for you to kind of come on and kind of share your story and kind of help?
Well, so my father refused blood for Jehovah. He had cancer and IgA nephropathy, and I learned he was very sick when I was 12. And my father was 6'2". He was, he worked out. He was a good sized man, and I watched him just wither into a corpse. And then the doctors, towards the end, they said they recommended a blood transfusion. And he remained loyal, and he died. And for a long time, I thought, well, he would have died anyway. But now it's like, no. I mean, he I would drink blood for my son. I would do most
Yeah.
anything. And I mean, he was tricked. In my mind, they murdered my father. He is a martyr. And I feel like it, not just that, because I'll tell you, often I tell a story so I can tell another story. But the time after that, the cruelty and the indifference from my mother and the congregation and the elders, I tried to kill myself probably over 20 times in my life. I wound up in a coma from overdosing on sleeping pills when I was 21. Well, that's how I celebrated my 21st birthday. I got drunk and overdosed. Seemed like a good idea at the
Yeah,
time.
as one does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but I also, over that time, I watched several people I grew up with kill themselves. I didn't see it, but
Hmm.
we had a shared
Yeah.
congregation. And what Jehovah's Witnesses would say is, well, that's what happens when you distance yourself from Jehovah. So I kind of feel like compelled to speak out. That's part of why I wanted to write, because I mean, I don't feel, it's almost like I bring them with me. It's almost like they get to live beyond their lives because they were cheated of their life. And when I woke up when I was 21, the doctor said what you took should have killed you because it was a lot. They said there's really no reason you should be alive. They said we suspect you may die soon from organ damage. And you know, I I've gone through a lot of things in my life, and I don't know why I'm here, and I don't know why they're not. But that's part of it. People suffer immeasurably, and often I feel like in the community, people don't talk about the pain in a vulnerable way.
Yeah.
They don't talk about healing or growth. It's always about whatever Watchtower is doing. And I do stay apprised. I do think the country music video is fascinating. I think it's terrible, but I mean that blew my mind when I saw that. It's
That's
incomprehensible to
hilarious.
me. Um,
I have no idea what that is, so now I
oh,
have to go back and look into that.
oh, do yourself a favor. Cowboy hats. It's unreal.
Okay, I have some homework. Yeah, I don't like faithfully follow, any of the XJW stuff,
Yeah,
but I do dip in here and there. But
yeah.
I do align with you. I lost my mom to cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've lost family to suicide. The more and more I talk with people, it's like, gosh, there's so many people that have very similar stories.
Yeah,
And I do believe, part of me, believes that some of our parents, it's just timing. They thought they were doing the right thing. They thought they were joining this religion to kind of help their family. They didn't have the resources we have today. They got caught up in this crazy shit, and they truly believed.
yeah,
And the problem is the ripple effects of true believers. It can be disastrous if what you believe is harmful,
yeah,
and horrible things like the blood doctrine. My sister thankfully was given blood. She got into a horrible car accident in 15 and had to get a court order to get blood because my dad would have murdered her.
yeah.
I
Well,
mean, it's just the reality.
yeah. The night my son was born, he had respiratory issues, and my ex-wife, um, she wasn't able to travel, so they flew him by helicopter, and I was disfellowshipped for the second time then. But my mother was there, and as she drove me, because she said you're in no state to drive, she tried to coerce me to let him die if he needed blood and get a liaison committee. These elders who treated me like contemptible trash, but I needed to call them to help me kill my child. And at the time, I didn't even it was so offensive and so upsetting because my first thought when I looked at him was, what if he's gay? I won't be able to love him.
Mm,
And so I did a cowardly thing. I called my ex-wife because I knew she wouldn't do it. And she hung up on me. And I just said, well, I'll deal with that if it comes, but I'm not going to discuss this anymore. I'll discuss it with my wife, not you. And thankfully, he was only in there 5 days. It was just Pitocin related. Um, and yeah, but yeah, I like to say the Jehovah's Witnesses are taught hatred and told it's love, and in that environment it's indistinguishable. I don't think it's an excuse. They're propagandized as we're
yeah,
Nazis. At a certain
yeah.
point you're doing bad things. It doesn't you're victimized, but still you're perpetuating it.
Yeah, it's a horrible thing where, I don't know, multiple realities exist. They truly believe that what they're doing is correct, and we often find in their minds, well, how do I say it? We're never going to be better than God in their minds.
No.
So that's the trump card. It's always gonna win the battle. Like, you're sinful in our eyes. Satan's got you, and I have to follow Jehovah because he's given me an opportunity for everlasting life.
Yeah.
And we all remember, for people that grew up a Jehovah's Witness, or maybe another cult or high control group where they're kind of preaching these things, and we parrot them, and we're saying all these things. I remember having multiple blood conversations, and saying, it's the right thing to do, and I'd rather pass the test now,
Yeah, me too.
than and make it into the promised new system of things, the paradise after Armageddon. And so it's just horrible because, as we know too, and we've discussed, they'll just change their minds next year,
Yeah.
and, allow some sort of blood fraction or thing to happen where, well, a year ago, all these kids died because of your new light.
Mm.
And, it's just horrible. And it is what it is. But I want to kind of go back to a little bit to when you were growing up, just to kind of get a foundation. What was, and kind of your best succinct way as possible, 1 years old or so to 12? What was that life leading up into that unfortunate tragedy of losing your father?
So I don't remember much. I didn't realize it was strange to only have a handful of memories of your childhood until I got out. I remember I have a few memories. I remember studying the Revelation book, and I remember hearing. I was obsessed with the imagery. I was very frightened, and I remember being told that we would be tortured more than anyone had ever been tortured in life. And so then I went about sneaking to learn about like the worst forms of torture. And I would lay in bed at night terrified and wonder what's worse than being fed to a lion alive or being burned at the stake. I would describe it as constant paralytic terror.
Was this stuff that you remember your mom teaching you, your dad, both? Like where were these memories coming from?
After book study, we went to an elder's house for book study, and we'd have like whatever little potlucks or whatever. But I remember hearing people talking about it and how exciting this book was and how close we were to Armageddon, and I was petrified. And I remember I would try and tell my parents I was afraid, and I would be told to pray to Jehovah, but I didn't love him, and I was afraid of him.
Yeah.
He didn't seem kind to me.
I find it intriguing that sometimes people that have faced trauma, myself included, and others I've talked to, it's just like your brain just kind of blocks shit out.
Yeah.
You're just like I have to heal. I have to protect myself as much as possible, and you literally just don't have memories of these things.
Hmm.
But the feeling sits there.
Yeah.
The feelings of how you felt growing up, the fear, the terror. I think people that are listening that have a curiosity and have grown up the way we have. I mean, we lived in a doomsday cult. Well, every day we thought,
Yeah.
the world was going to end. It was just around the corner,
Hmm.
and you mess up, you say something wrong, you don't preach enough, you're blood guilty. Especially as a child, it's like you genuinely believe that these are not fairy tales.
Yeah. And what if I dropped something and I cursed? What if Armageddon's in the morning? Has enough time passed from when I did something wrong? Will I be spared or not? These are not the ideas that should be in a child's head. My son looks just like me when I was a child, and I have noticed he's 7, but as he's aging, more and more of my memories are returning.
Do you find that as some of these memory come back, you remember positive memories, or some of them pretty much what you're having recollect is really kind of traumatic?
So I do remember having fun with my friends. I hated school because I believed if I didn't tell these people they might die and Jehovah would kill me. So, but I did have some friendships that were fun. It wasn't all bad. I mean, in hindsight, you see it and you're like, oh, how horrific a child was treated that way. But and I knew if I wanted I always like to shock people. I always thought it was funny, especially as a child, because I thought like people get offended about words but not actions. And so I was in trouble a lot. I guess even from a young age, I was a bit of a provocateur.
It's interesting. The more I talk to people too, you do start to find out people's DNA and their makeup is innate.
Hmm.
There's stuff that, yes, your environment does help shape you, but like you are kind of who you are.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
and it's like, and I feel like a good parent, and I've said this before, but a good parent guides their child to be the best version of who they already are.
Yeah.
And when you grow up in a cult, you don't get the leeway to choose the best path to become who you are.
No.
You have one path to salvation, and it's very strict and rigid. And I remember the same thing you remember. Our school was our ministry growing up.
Yeah.
I remember being told you need to go preach to children in school. And it's like, dude, we're in like third, fourth grade. Like,
Psychotic.
and
Yeah.
it's like you're not even fully going to school to be someone that's learning. You're like, no, I have to bring books and watchtowers. I remember bringing The Greatest Man Who Ever Lived book and trying to place it with students. And you feel bad if like, oh, I'm not good enough. I may have caused my friend to die. Like,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, I really like that kid. I hope he doesn't, Satan doesn't attack him in Armageddon, or whatever. And it's it's just very conflicting. It's hard to explain for people that don't understand the way we grew up.
Like, yeah, like when I look at my son, I gave my first talk when I was 7, and I just recently, what I always, it's like when I get a new memory, it's almost like it's just unlocked. And even when last year I saw the movie Heretic in horror movie in the theater about Mormons, and they were, when they were like out preaching, I had this PTSD flashback in the theater, and I'm like grabbing my chair, and yeah, they're really intense. But when I think about giving a talk in front, if I ask my son, that is so ridiculous. I mean, he's a smart boy, he's very sweet and gentle, but that is so ridiculous because I was petrified. And that was actually the first time that I disassociated. I remember
Mm.
feeling I was above myself and to the left, and my voice kind of turned into like like just vowels, and it sounded like I was down a hallway. And then I just realized I was at the end of my Bible reading, and then I felt like I was back in my body when I disassociated. But at the time, I had been told if I mispronounce any words, that's disrespectful to Jehovah. I might incur his wrath. So I was afraid he would kill me. But I thought it was the Holy Spirit because my mom said he would send an angel to me to help me.
I would love to know, um, what were your parents like as part of this? Because you are kind of saying, I mean, is this your father kind of putting the terror in you? Is this your
No.
mother? Are they playing good cop, bad cop? Like, what was the dynamic?
So both of my parents came from pretty brutal childhoods. My father he was a mailman. He had part-time jobs. He liked to go to the gym, and he went to college part-time. He would get up early every Sunday and study his watchtower, but he never studied with our family. I remember I found in the garage he had a copy of Terminator 1 and 2, and I like pleaded with him and cried to throw them away so he wouldn't be destroyed. And I remember
Mm.
the look on his face. I think it was shock, you know. Now my father only whipped me once, and to be fair, I really deserved it that day. I had been like for 8 hours. I'd been just terrorizing the house. But my mother was far more physically abusive. If I would fall asleep
Mm.
in meetings, she would pinch me, hit me in the face, whip me with a belt. Her favorite scripture was "Beat him with the rod; he will not die." And after my father died, my mother even she became a lot darker. She had a very dark sense of humor for a long time. She never studied with me regularly, but yeah, after my father's death, she actually complained that hadn't taken the lead spiritually and studied with her or asked her to go out in service. Now I'm 13,
At 12, 13.
and
Yeah.
I've just carried my father's casket to a grave. you know, she is a fundamentally a complete failure as a mother. Every time I needed her in my life, she let me down and betrayed me.
Do you have any redeemable qualities or positive memories of your mom? It seems like your father actually just he kind of more occupied that role for you.
Yeah, he wasn't. I didn't see him a lot. He was always kind of like my hero. He would take me to ride horses down south a little, or he worked on cars. And even I remember at the congregation when I was like 10, the teenager boys, they all thought my dad was cool. He told me it was important to be kind to people who had it worse than you. My mother would tell me when we go out to eat I needed to be quiet. They weren't there to hear what I had to say. You need to go play in your room. I remember wanting to be around her, but I was also kind of, after his death, it was like being in a cult of one person in a doomsday cult. My mother didn't teach me
Yeah.
how to pay bills or do anything. So all I knew how to do was pray. and the
Yeah.
result was always the same. I don't know. I remember I told her once, I said, I buried the wrong parent. I think dad would have taken care of me. And she would say, like, I don't feel love from you. And I was like, I mean, what do you expect? Like she would denigrate me. She would invite people into our home who mocked me for trying to kill myself, and she would force me to spend time with them.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I don't think about her at all, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem like, have you ever had the chance to talk with her or even maybe break down? Like, why are you this way, mom?
It
What happened?
So, my mother would never tell me about her childhood. She would never tell me about any mistakes because she was my mother and I might view her differently, which is absurd. I put all of my worst mistakes in a book for my son because he was the only person I knew for sure that would probably read it when I was writing it. A few months ago, I my ex-wife allows her to babysit my son. She made us pay her to babysit him when we were married, but now she does it for free because my ex-wife is no longer a Jehovah's Witness. And my son happened to be at her home, and I hadn't spoken to her in almost we hadn't spoken almost 5 years. And she just sent me a text and said, "Hi, it's mom." And so when I went up to her and I said, I accept that you did not care when I told you the elders were abusing me and mistreating me. I accept that you told me to stay in a horrible marriage. I accept that you betrayed me when I was in jail and homeless and left me to die in the streets and made sure that I was left with just nothing and estranged from my son for years. I don't want texts or messages from you, especially just, hey, it's mom. I said, "You are the woman who used to be my mother." And she cut me off and tried to say, "Well, I don't care what your intentions are. These are boundaries you have crossed, and it is unacceptable." And I realized in that moment that I'm 42 years old, but she treats me like I'm a child. And that's all I am to her as an extension of her. And she she asked me, she said, "Do you want to come in and talk?" And I laughed and I said, "I don't ever want to see you again." I had forgotten what her voice sounded like. And I didn't know what she looked like because it had been 5 years. And now I do. And now I have to wait another 5 years to forget, probably. But, one day I'll hear she's dead. And I don't know how that will affect me because we don't know what we don't know. But, that's all it is. I'm just waiting for a death because there is nothing.
It's really complicated. I don't know if it's a positive thing or a negative thing, but my own father shuns me because of my disassociation. And it's like I have no relationship with my father, but my father also was not a perfect person.
Yeah.
He wasn't horrible to me, but like he was, to some of my siblings. I was the youngest of 8,
Oh, wow.
and so a lot of the problems, a lot of my older siblings can regale much better than I can. But it's complicated. It's like you have a parent that's dead to you, but they're not dead.
Yeah.
But then there will be some finality when they are actually dead.
Yeah.
And for me personally, it's like there was nothing I would love better than for my father to just message me and say, "I'm so sorry."
Yeah. You know,
You know what I mean?
if my mother she's impossible to speak to, like, truly. Like, if you were to do something to me and I were to say, "Hey, you did this and it made me feel that way." Most people could hear that and engage with that. She cannot. She just says, "Well, my intentions were," it's just it, it's useless. I've had so many people try and tell me, I need to reconcile. And it's like, I mean, you need to shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. You didn't come out of what I came out of. There's nothing there. And she is an absolute hypocrite because my son isn't baptized. So he has birthdays, and all this stuff. And she's fine to watch him and love him. But her own child, impossible.
It's weird mental gymnastics, man. They do it all the time.
Yeah.
And I I I find it wild. It's the complexity of a person that they believe so much what they're preaching, but they don't follow what they're preaching.
Yeah.
And it's like where is the love of God is love, Jesus is love, like these things in the scriptures, and it's like you don't embody that at all.
No.
And yet this framework for life has ruined lives and causes division. And I don't know, I feel like there's there's a couple things happening that, from what I see, in my opinion, is like parents are this way, and they use the religious framework to house some of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like they get around some of the stuff with this framework, and it's like, no, you're just a bad person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I don't even know who she is, honestly. She would tell me, when she was a child, she had a sister die who was 9, another died at 14. Her mother died at 35 when my mother was 5. Her father was an alcoholic. Her grandmother lived with him. She was an alcoholic. She didn't have a good relationship with her stepmother until she was an adult, not long before she died. And my mother would say, and her husband died, and then her son had emotional problems, which she would tell me I was a narcissist because I was suicidal, which
Mm.
I don't. I mean,
It's somehow, yeah.
yeah,
That's how it works.
I
Somehow
like
it's your
I
fault.
was I was suffering so much that I'm cutting myself and just in agony, and but I don't know. I don't know. The past can't have been any other way, so I don't scrutinize, I don't analyze. I'm fine to discuss it, but
Yeah.
there is no utility or purpose in looking back. There really isn't.
Yeah, I find if I ever try to talk with my father, and when we were speaking, you, you just never get anywhere.
No. Well,
Um,
you know where they're headed.
they're like, yeah, they kind of have a just, this is the route they take, and then they call it and they shut down.
Yeah.
Like even a dialogue we're having now, as people who met 30 minutes ago, we're having more of a conversation
Oh, yeah.
back and forth than we would ever have with our own parents. And it's really sad.
It is, and I think one thing I don't hear. Years ago, a friend of mine, Amber, I met her on Reddit, and her first husband died on the job site. I guess they were looking for him for like 24 hours, and then they found him. And she said we had a great relationship. We never fought, and I loved him. But she said when I look at my current boyfriend compared to him, it was so superficial, and that really resonated with me. And I thought about it a lot, and it's true in my case. Like, yeah, you and I can engage, and I can hear you. But with those people, you just can't, because they're always going to bring it back to you're a sinner and you need to return to Jehovah. So because they're told it's a loving provision, but it's
Yeah.
when you're in jail, do you know what the worst thing they can do to you? Lock you alone in a room and keep you away. Even though you're
Oh yeah.
surrounded by horrible people, that's the worst torture they can do. Shunning is a
Yeah.
form of torture.
Yeah. The isolation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. I Yeah, we face shunning, and it's also conflicting because we want these people, our parents, these loved ones, to be more than they are.
Yeah.
I've lost many people, and some have kind of checked back in, but the version that they are now, it's over. It's gone. That person no longer exists.
Yeah.
And it just sucks. The older we get, we improve, we set boundaries, we try to move along on our journey and just be better people for not only ourselves but our partners, and healthy relationships that we have, and of course, children. I don't have any children myself, but I can definitely relate to any person that's come out of any sort of issue with, traumatic experiences with parents, with religion, with anything. And it's like, gosh, I just got to do better. I just got to do better.
Yeah, I am a kinder, gentler, more empathetic, better human being than I ever was trying to apply the fruitages of the Spirit. And honestly, I probably do apply them, but it's just I want to do it. I want to do it in my own way. You know, I don't care how or why you're loving. I mean, unless if it's like manipulation or but like if it's genuine, if it's coming from a genuine place and you're a good person, that's enough. It doesn't matter to me what you
Yeah.
believe. And as long as it, like I said, it's not something terrible, and it's just you're so circumscribed and contrived by that environment. It's almost like I read about in Japan. I think it's Japan. They grow watermelons in these enclosures that are square, so they can stack them, which is awesome. I wish they do that here. But it's like in that environment, you're only allowed to grow within their framework, and it's crazy to me how much I have grown in almost 5 years compared to my mother, who's in her 70s, and she's exactly how I was when I was a child. It's crazy.
It's really sad. I do have an empathy. You mentioned the horrible
Hmm.
upbringing she had. I mean,
Oh,
it makes
yeah.
sense.
My father was abused in every way imaginable. They were extremely poor in Brooklyn, Indiana. There's a large dump. My father lived in that as a child for a time. I was told when he went to bed at night, rats bit him. So both of them came from horrible
Mm,
trauma. But cults prey on vulnerable people.
yeah, yeah. They were never given the correct tools, and they
Yeah.
sought out tools, and these tools just did not help in any way,
No.
shape, or form. So you grew up and you basically you took to these traumatic words. You didn't resonate with the loving message of the Bible. You resonated with the fear of loss and destruction of Armageddon and whatnot. When your dad died, how did that kind of collide with your faith? Like, and I know you mentioned this in the book, but obviously some people haven't read your book. Um, but what was going on there with your father's passing?
So at his funeral, I was told to be proud of him because he died loyal. And my father was a strong man. I do appreciate the strength that that would take, but I wanted him back desperately. So I essentially put on blinders and just, I was baptized less than 4 months after, and I wanted him back. But also, I began to notice this. Because you said you asked me about being 1 through 12, like it. I mean, there was fright, but I still thought I was in this thing. And but after his death, I was changed irrevocably, and everyone began to dislike me and insult me and reject me, and I never understood why. Now I've learned why.
Yeah, and I want to dive into that, but it definitely, gosh, it seems like your life really took just a horrible turn. After the tragic passing of your father, and that's a common theme too of like you hope that this congregation, this group, this community shows up for you. And it's like I
Yeah.
would love to have, some brothers step up and be a foster father to some extent and show love and show care, even if I lash out, that's expected. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, the lash out's going to happen, the trauma is going to be there, and it's like, and we're going to actually be worse for
Yeah.
you.
Well, I was told to stop speaking about him. I was told to get over him. I was told that my mother's loss was greater than mine. And 3 months or 3 years after my father died, my mother had breast cancer. And then for about 10 years, she just kept having, she had her thyroid removed. She had a hysterectomy, which pushed her into premature menopause. And all of those surgeries and health concerns were terrifying. And there was no empathy, no kindness. It was just, you haven't come to the meeting. You're wearing all black. You're reading Edgar Allan Poe. You're watching our movies. These ridiculous, superficial, innocuous things when I'm dealing with things that gave me, the average 13-year-old does not have a sense of mortality. And I was just
Mhm.
rejected, and always I was denigrated. I don't I My mother gave me a bracelet with my baptism date. I didn't know when it was, but 4 months after my father's death, like 3.5 months, and I was told I wasn't worthy to serve Jehovah because I didn't remember it. It was just, I knew there was something wrong, but everyone told me it was me. My mother, the elders, the
Yeah.
congregation, but I wanted my father back, and so I tolerated all of that abuse.
Yeah, and do you do you look back and go, I don't know, like, why is it no one in this religion had any ability to show compassion?
No, because when I looked and found, part of my deconstruction was finding cult tactics, and one of them is that cult members must be walking, talking advertisements for the group, and I wasn't that. I wanted to wear all black. I wanted to wear band shirts. I wanted to drive muscle cars, and all of the things that I liked, they told me to pray away. So I feel like I have a complete grasp on it now. But when I was inside, yeah, it never made sense. And every time I would go to a therapist, eventually they would suggest, "Have you ever thought about leaving?" And I would stop going.
Well, and that's tough too. Like a lot of people don't realize it's like, the farther you get away from it, of course that's the right
Yeah,
thing to say, like, if you're constantly touching this flame and it's burning you, maybe stop going to that fire and touching it.
yeah,
But it's like when you genuinely believe that, this is the real truth and it's going to also give you an opportunity to see your father again.
yeah,
It's like, of course, like I constantly stayed in longer because I hope to see my mom
yeah,
again. And had multiple moments of crying and just like, gosh, I'm not good enough, like,
yeah.
very similar, like, I never felt like, I fully fit in. I wasn't the exact image that was printed on the watchtower of how we
Ugh,
should look and dress and act.
khaki.
And yeah, just I'm not wearing fucking khakis, man, like it's not happening. I'm gonna go to concerts. I'm gonna go to dive bars. I'm gonna, wear band T-shirts. Yeah, I'm gonna be who I want to be. And I constantly went as far as I possibly could to the limits of what I was allowed.
Oh yeah,
And now post being disfellowshipped and gone. It's like, dude, I just want to be who I'm gonna be. I'm not a bad person
yeah.
at all. I just want to express myself in the way I want to express myself. And it's so tough.
Well, and because there was no empathy or support, that was why I turned to art and I began writing.
And I think, like I said at the beginning, like, you're an artist, man. You should be proud.
Thank you.
They take that stuff from us. They don't allow us to truly be our authentic selves, and part of that is our expression.
Yeah.
My co-host, who's unfortunately not on the podcast today, like, he's a very talented musician, very talented. And they took that from him. Like, it's you never know what could have happened, but very good with guitar. His vocals are great. He writes great lyrics and music, and he doesn't really have it. It's kind of I hope that he kind of picks it up more and really goes off. He does some recorded beats and different tracks and stuff, but it's like it's tough to do the what if game, but but you're able to, and which I think is great, and I wanna talk about more as we get along with it, but, you're doing it, man. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
So so, so this tragedy happens, obviously, you're not getting the support from your mom and frankly, never
Yeah.
have. Um, is that why and we touched on a little bit, is that why you just really like, I know this is kind of a sad thing and you did kinda mention it, but, like, gosh, do you think that you'd be the same if the roles are reversed and your mom passed?
You know, it's hard to know. And like I said, I think, I spent a long time kind of wondering about that, but you know, something outside of the truth is life has problems without answers sometimes. And, like I said, I don't think there's any utility in that. At this point, I wouldn't change a single thing.
Yeah.
I am sorry that people were harmed and hurt, myself included, but it brought me to who I am, to the best version of myself, to the best father. I'm a far better father now than I was. And also, I am divorced, but my ex-wife isn't in a cult, and yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it is really hard. Like, and I would gather basically everyone would say the same thing, myself included. I am who I am because of what I went through. My life experiences made me who I
yeah,
am, and I wouldn't change it for anything. There are things about growing up, in a quote unquote Christian religion that I'm thankful for. That I have
yeah,
some morals that are kind of based on some of the guidelines of the Bible. Um, and it could be, a far different scenario if I grew up in another area of the country or the
yeah,
world. So I try to give a mindset to that as
hmm
well. But the reality is, Micah, like, I hope everyone gets a chance to buy your book. I really do, because it's one thing to discuss this in, an hour conversation or whatever, but to read your poetry and to read your words, um, your life, like, it's really, really, really sad, man. Like, you were wronged, and we don't get that time back.
yeah.
Can you kind of talk about, and just enough, because I really do want people to read all of it. But what's 13 to time in jail? What's that journey?
So, I, a lot of trouble. I was publicly reproved, privately reproved numerous times. I would go months without going to the Kingdom Hall. I was a regular, and I would say the fun that I had during that time. I mean, like, I used to street race. I used to, pull pranks with my, teenager stuff, early 20s. But
Yeah.
really, there was no fun in the society. I only had a few people that I befriended, but like I was very good friends with someone. I was best man in their wedding, but when they got married, that's a culture for couples, and I was single, and so I was disfellowshipped at 23. I was for about 18 months, and then but all of the coolest things I did during that time were all art related. I kept writing for 20 years. I also have made 50, 60 pieces of art. I like to do abstract paintings and drawings. I haven't done any since leaving the cult. And the first time I was disfellowshipped, I had an opportunity to perform stand-up comedy and host this event in between. It was a bunch of rap bands and me in a Black Sabbath shirt. And what was interesting is everything I read about stand-up comedy is you'll fail. You're going to be terrible for
Yeah.
months. But I thought, well, how many people have the balls to do this? So I went, and surprisingly, I got a really good reaction. And even one of the band managers asked me to tour with him, said he would get me gigs.
That's cool.
But I said, no, I've got to return to Jehovah. And when I would have my art displayed, I was offered a local show downtown. I've sold pieces of my art, several hundred, nothing crazy. But art was always, what turned me on and what excited me. And even um, when I was a boy, I met this girl online, and she was the first person to compliment my writing. And I received a lot of compliments for it online, actually. But she lives on the other side of the world, and I had wanted to go visit her. And actually, because she was the only person who was nice to me, and my mother coerced me into cutting her off, and that was when I overdosed on sleeping pills. Um, And you mentioned me being wronged. You are right, but at the same time, I'm not dead. not like my dad,
Oh
not
yeah.
like the men I grew up with. And most people are not tested in their life. They're not tested. When I got outside, well, I'll get to that. But so when I was 33, this nurse that I worked with started asking me about the truth. And then she came to a meeting and she asked for a study and she kept coming. She went out in service. And and she was very beautiful. And of course, the congregation liked her, but they hated me. So the elders tried to keep me away from her, and I ended up being shunned for the second time in my life. And that was about 2.5 years, 2 years and 7 months, I think. But I moved in with her and I eloped, and then she had told me that she would tell her family that we were married, but she didn't. And
Now this is the interesting thing. I don't mean to
you're good.
interject. If this is like, because I'm just reading through your
Mhm.
book, and unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of time to really let it sink in. But is this the same situation where the elders were like, move into a shelter?
Yes.
It's fucking
Yeah,
ridiculous.
it is.
Yeah, yeah. Could you just explain that a little bit? Because I just really resonated with me, and I think the listeners. It's wild, man. No one would ever tell
Yeah.
you
No,
this,
no, no.
but this is the type of
Yeah.
shit that we're
Yeah.
told.
So, because I said this is not scriptural, they were like, well, people are being offended. And I said, well, I don't give a fuck. You don't care if I try and kill myself. You don't include me. You don't, when I say hi to you, you don't acknowledge me. But this woman is nice to me and you all have a problem. So, and of course, now, I talked about my mother essentially hobbling me in many ways. She took the majority of my money. I would move out on and off, but I usually ended up moving back in with her. So she tells me, you have to be out in 2 days. And I'm like, well, where am I supposed to go? And the elder, yeah, it's funny, I'd forgotten that, but he told me, yeah, move into a shelter. They have places for people like you. And if am I gonna move in with a beautiful woman and have sex with her or move into a shelter? Nah, that's not a hard choice. So, but that was just how I was always treated. Like, it. I tried to be concise in mentally diseased when I worked with my editor Moses. I said, I didn't want to like belabor stuff. I just wanted to hit like the high points, I guess. But yeah, it's just the inhumanity is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so your mom kicks you out with no notice,
Yeah,
and then you're like, I don't have anywhere to go. You have a wonderful person that is like, well, you can come live with me,
yeah,
and the elders always just kind of get in the mix of
yeah,
everything. And it's like, no, you can't move in with her. You need to move into a shelter. I just find that wild.
yeah,
It's like, and it's really just like they just see it as like, well, you can't live with a woman unless you're married with
yeah,
her.
yeah, yeah.
You can't be with this person because that's you're going to be
I
sinful.
yeah.
Uh, it's just
I
I
I
don't know. It's hard to
I
describe.
honestly think they just couldn't believe that anyone would even uh, be even want to spend time with me. They just, yeah, I mean, they were just inhuman. I've never been around people like that. It's just insane to me. But yeah, so so once we're married, I'm cut off from the few friends that I have. My mother's shunning me, and my ex-wife won't tell her family. And to me, I rebelled against God for you. So tell your fucking parents you married. Why did you marry me? Now I would be like, yeah, I'm gonna annul this. Like, whatever. That's bullshit. I don't deserve that. But I just really collapsed in on myself like a dying star, and I just thought I'm gonna be drunk every single day, either until Armageddon or I die. Because I didn't. I told her at one point. I said, "Listen, it had been months." I said, "Every day you don't tell them I love you less." And she was like, "What a horrible thing to
Mm,
say." And I'm like, "I mean, it's just true. You're betraying me on a daily basis. You can call them right now and rectify this, you know." Because I did love her, but she's never explained to me why. I mean, maybe I don't even really know who she is now. I mean, I just text her about
yeah,
getting my son. She was a very weak person. I mean,
yeah,
spineless, really. And I don't say that in an insulting way. She just was. And I mean, also, she joined a
yeah.
cult for me, which I do like to say if people don't think I'm charming, I'm like, has a woman joined a cult for you? But, um,
That is
yeah.
one way to look at
Um,
it. Yeah, everything's full of nuance,
yeah.
man.
And
You know, it's
Yeah, and
challenging.
I'm sure it would be hard to say, "Hey, I've joined this fruitcake religion, and they're telling me not to talk to you." I do, understand like that would be a difficult thing to navigate. I've always been a very blunt person, and like I feel like people should deserve to know where I stand on things, but a lot of people aren't that way. So yeah, I just binge drank for years, and then COVID happened, and I thought that was Armageddon, and that exacerbated my drinking. And then also I had some I years prior, the summer I was 30, two men I grew up with killed themselves. And I actually I wrote a poem about it, that is in my second book, Gangrenous Speeches. And I had reached out to an elder and I told him I had this suicide plan, and I even had a backup plan with it. And he just said, "Well, you have an easy life. What are you complaining about?" And it actually was so devastating to me. When I got off the phone, I just like went to sleep. Like I was like, why? I'm trying. I'm being honest. I'm being open about my struggles. And that was, and then people would just stop talking to me. Because when I was shunned and not shunned, there really wasn't much difference. Only a few people really spoke to me.
I was gonna say, have you had the chance to reflect back on why you continually went back to the biting dogs and these elders and these people?
Because my mother told me to, and she would say, your father wants to see you again.
Gosh, you weaponized it.
And so I called him during COVID. Now I was drunk, and this is in my memoir too. And so I was screaming at him on the phone because he lied about saying it. Because I was trying to be peaceable, right? Make peace with your brother. And I said, I just can't let this go. And he goes, I never said that. And I was like, no, no, you did. And he said, well, no. And actually, the elder who told me to move into the shelter, he said he was there. And I said, well, we spoke on the phone. Are you telling me he was listening in the background? And so I hung up on him. And so he called me back and said, you don't hang up on me, boy. And so I said some nasty things to him, and I was screaming, and I stabbed the counter with this knife I had been holding. I was cutting vegetables for dinner, and I cut my hand accidentally. Well, somebody called the police, and when they opened the door, I'm bleeding everywhere because my hand's cut. So, this story's in there, but so I
Yeah,
wind up locked into like a 3-day hold in a stress center. And then when I get out, that elder told my mother that I had threatened to kill everyone at the Kingdom Hall. And I told her, I said, well, if I wanted to kill a group of people, I wouldn't warn them. That doesn't even make sense. And she said, "Oh,
yeah,
that's great, Micah," and blocked my number. And so I just kept drinking and spiraling. I was started getting on the ex Jehovah's Witness Reddit, and I had to get nearly blackout drunk to do that because it felt so sinful. And I was so desperate
yeah.
because I'm like, I don't want to do something where I don't see dad again. But this just doesn't make sense, you know?
It's really hard to describe, and for listeners, reading apostate material, and one of our people that we explained it was like the first time he viewed it, he could only look at that stuff like quickly.
Yeah.
He look at it quickly, and then he had to turn away. Like you're seeing the most like pornographic image in the
Oh, yeah.
world, and it just makes you shake.
Yeah.
Where you're like, shouldn't be looking at this stuff, and it's just so hard to describe. Like when you look at this stuff, it's scary,
Yeah,
man.
I was reading a newspaper once and I saw an article about Jehovah's Witnesses and CSA and I threw the magazine. It felt like there were demons in it. It's a very
Mhm.
real fear.
But at the same time, it's interesting because you're still pulled towards it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a fulcrum. And then you're just like out of desperation, you're like, I know what I've been told and I know what I believe, but it just doesn't match my experience. And you need to it's just this desperation. And, what is it? You can't trust your heart because it's treacherous. And you're told to avoid independent thinking. You have no guidance. All you can do is obey.
Well, yeah, and we're taught, it does not belong to us to watch our own step.
Yeah, exactly.
It's this constant verbiage where you're like, well, I can't trust myself, my own tuition, my own thoughts. Okay, so I need to go. Okay, so go to the Young People Ask book.
Oh,
Go to the Watchtower and Awake. Go to these
yeah.
articles. Listen to these talks, and so yeah, it's
Oh
confusing.
yeah, and I mean, you're hobbled, and I think it's intentional because if you go out into the world, it's so difficult. It's likely you'll return or you'll kill yourself, and either way, that suits their narrative, Or even if you're
And
successful,
you
they say Satan blessed them. It's
and you touched on this a few times, and obviously it's horrible, but you black out, you turn to medicating through
mhm.
alcohol, um, and you had said multiple times that you wish to I mean, end your life. Like, one, I'm grateful that you didn't.
Thank you.
I'm anyone as someone who's experienced loss, personally. Anyone that can overcome that horrible challenge is I'm just so grateful, even if I don't know you that well, that you got through that really tough
Yeah,
time.
thank you.
Um, but what was the draw to that?
Oh,
Where was your mind at through that process?
because I would have rather been asleep in death or wake up in paradise than live as a Jehovah's Witness. And they hated me. Yeah, and like I said, anytime I would venture out into the world, people would say, "Hey, you're funny. We like this art. This speaks to us." And not everybody. Art is subjective, but or I had jobs where they'd say, "Hey, she wants you to ask her out," But I viewed all of those things as temptation from Satan trying to, extract me. Uh, and like I said, so I wake up in jail. I find that, that I'm in there. My mother, betrays me. And I knew that she was going to try because one of the last time she spoke to me, she told me that my son was her priority now. And I said, "Are you high, bitch?" He's my child. Like he's your grandson, but that you are not. You don't trump me. But my whole life was about. Yeah, of course, we were good for nothing slaves, but being diminished, being told my role doesn't matter, and so I had a public defender who lied to me and threw me under the bus, and I knew that I would be homeless, but my son was out there among cultists, so I signed the plea bargain. And when I got out, I intended to live in my Mustang. Well, it had been repossessed, and it was COVID,
Mm,
and I had $60. So I crawled under a bridge near where my former home had been. And I thought, like, where can I live under here where like bugs will bite me the least, right? And I have
mm,
never felt that alone or that afraid. And I thought for a minute, oh, I don't want to feel this. Maybe I'll get drunk. Or maybe I should, but I'd already promised my son, who was, I mean, I don't think he was even 2 at the time, or maybe just barely. I was like, no, I promised him, and I will not betray my vow to my child. So I didn't know, like I said, you don't know how to even really how to think or what to do. All you know is reliance and codependency on the organization and the brothers. So I moved into a halfway house, and I remember watching January 6th live on TV, and that terrified me. I thought, oh my God, this really is Armageddon, And so in those meetings, the similarities between the two groups were staggering to me. It's all about service and all of, and it's talking about God, but saying it's not religious. It speaks out of both sides of its mouth. But they told me all of these things about myself, that I have a spiritual malady and that I will drink and that my mind will lie to me. You have a disease that says it's not a disease. Your disease is in the parking lot doing push-ups while you're in a meeting. So I devoured their literature. Half the people I was in there with couldn't even read. And it didn't make sense. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous teaches predestination. And I would say, well, what's the evidence for this? Oh, you think too much. Well, where have I heard that before? And so
Yeah.
my father wasn't related to that. So I began openly mocking people and the things they were saying, not them, their faith, because it was ridiculous to me, the things I was hearing. People are saying they have a God that's so powerful, but they can't hold a job at McDonald's. They can't stop doing heroin, but God has their back, delusional. And they're telling me that these are my people. And then they started using AA shaming terms. They told me I'm a dry drunk.
Mm.
They told me I suffer from terminal uniqueness. And when I said that, alcohol had been my coping mechanism, but I was done with it.
I've never heard that term before, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Terminal uniqueness?
Yeah, because they said, well, that's when you think that your relationship with alcohol is so unique, no one could understand it. Well, it is unique because we're all unique individuals. But
Oh, yeah.
people, it's like, and then when I went to therapy and I'm telling them about my mother and my father and my treatment and my marriage, I mean, they're like, oh, yeah, you drank. I mean, I'm like, yeah, when I was 18, I weighed 300 pounds. The only things you could do really were eat and drink. And, I had no support in that environment. So they kept trying to tell me things about myself, things that I knew. One of the things they told me, they said that addicts are people pleasers. Well, I don't give a fuck if people like me or not. If they do, great. But I've never been accused of that. And I was like, this is a bunch of bullshit. And it's all about control.
Yeah.
I haven't drank in almost 5 years. September 2nd, I work in a bar, and people negate that I had a problem. They say, well, I'm a real alcoholic. Fine, buddy. If that's what you want to be, I think that's pathetic. I think
Yeah.
you deserve better, but whatever. I don't care, And
I think you're cursed with awareness.
possibly. I used to have a sticker on my mini fridge that said, forever I walk among the ignorant. And,
Yeah.
that may have been prophetic, but I had some of my clothes, a few of my possessions, and I had my laptop. And my laptop had everything I'd written from 13 to 37.
Oh, that's great.
And as I read it, I could tell that I was using art to ask questions about my environment that I couldn't vocalize. And I remembered who I had been, who I had repressed, and I was like, yeah, I do love art. And
Yeah.
that's where like so many times I found comfort in lines from movies and films and songs. And even when I was under that bridge, in my mind popped a line. I didn't know where it was from. The fallacy is that the steamroller determines whether or not the object will be destroyed. It's from The Office. I don't know if you watch it, but James
I
Spader's
do.
character says it. And that line spoke to me so much in that moment. And I was like, I will not die under a bridge. I will get out
Yeah.
of this. I don't know how, but I will get out for my son. And so I decided that I would write a book. And I decided it would be published. I'd never done that before. I didn't know how, but it would happen. So I began working. I found a literary agent. Her partner, I believe, committed suicide. So she told me
Oh,
she needed some time. And then when I checked back in, her website was down and I wasn't able to, she ghosted me. That's fine. I'm not upset or judging her, but it was like, all right, I'm still going to make this happen. Right. So I hired a lawyer to review my memoir when it was finished. I did edits like about 10 myself, and then I hired an editor online, and we worked together, had a great collaboration. I hired Sarah Riches, who is an ex-Jehovah's Witness, to
oh yeah, great artist.
yeah, she painted the cover of my memoir, and actually she sent me the painting, half me as a boy, half as a man. And
That's great.
that I published it on my 40th birthday. I reclaimed my birthday, and I think that was the first time in my life I lived in the moment. I didn't think about, oh, this movie's coming out. I hope it comes before Armageddon, or how many more times will I be able to listen to this song before I can't listen to heavy metal.
I think there's something there, just to stop you for a moment, because I
Yeah.
don't want to forget it. I think a lot of witnesses, whether or not they realize it, they really get into escapism.
Oh, yes. I played video games constantly, and I was always drunk, and it was like,
And you dressed up as Batman and went to conventions,
oh,
or no,
no,
Bane.
villains. Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
Bane
yeah,
and Joker. Why not Batman?
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and I do impressions. I always like to do that, so I would never break character when I would go to Comic-Con. And of course, that was never well received. But the day I published Mentally Diseased, it felt like I grabbed reality and bent it to my will. Now, to be open with you, I planned to kill myself after I published it. I was barely
Oh
seeing
wow.
my son. I figured I'm a failure as a father, and he deserves to know why I'm dead. That was one of the reasons. And the night it came out, a friend of mine read it and messaged me in the morning, and I told her that, and she said, "Yeah, but that would destroy its meaning." I was like, what meaning?" And then I had someone reach out to me and say, "I read your story, and I decided to stop drinking." And I was like, wow. Like,
Yes.
I told him, to be clear, all of that goes to you. I don't feel like I did anything, but I realized that my art was affecting people, and it had caused a positive change in the world. And I was like, wow. So, Mentally Diseased became the first book in the Apostasy Trilogy. I published 3 books in a year. And now Mentally Diseased has a poem before each chapter, but all of the rest of those poems went into my second book, Gangrenous Speeches. And then 6 months after that, I published a horror novella about the Antichrist to a hateful God. I created a fictional religion, and it's an allegory for leaving. But I always loved, the macabre and dark stuff. So I'm like, I'm going to embrace this and write a really fucked up story. And even the violence in Despicable is really a commentary on like how there aren't boundaries, in that environment.
That's wonderful, man. Like, I really appreciate you
Yeah,
sharing that.
thank you.
Even this moment, we wouldn't have to share, which I'm very grateful for. Like, if you would have gone through with that, I'm I'm very grateful that that friend reached out to you so quickly. Um, yeah, yeah, and I have all your books, so I'm going to enjoy reading all of them in order. Um, gosh, yeah, I mean, we don't want to be starved, from people that have talent and have a voice. So whether it's on a podcast or the written form, or even with art expression, in any way, shape, or form, we need to keep you people
Oh,
around.
thank you.
You're a balancing agent.
Oh, thanks.
Very grateful.
I'm grateful to be here, and I'm great. I'm grateful that people read my writing. And for me, it's like I always say with art, you want love or hatred. Apathy is death. But also, what was crazy for me is, I got positive feedback. I had people say, "Wow, like people will message me screenshots." One man said, "It's like you wrote the words down that were in my head," and it was like that, like
Mhm.
damn, like that. It's because I was just so irrelevant for I non-entity. People didn't care.
Yeah, and you have a voice that is unique, but people do relate. There are people out there like you all over. We
Yeah,
were never taught this. We were in a bubble. But also, like, yeah, your words have meaning, your words have weight, and it's even just this conversation, like, people
yeah,
will relate to you. And it's like, with a voice that's silenced, it's just, it's not good, man. So that's a goal of this podcast, is to talk with people like you, and the more and more people go like, gosh, that's my guy, like, like I totally get it, the pain, the suffering, or even just like, dude,
Yeah.
I relate to him. I relate to the Misfits. I love that music. He's wearing a t-shirt, yeah, that for people as a audio only podcast. Um, it's it's great to have voices like yours, and you know, uh, uh, it sucks when people are silenced early, and it sucks when people are very young and don't even realize they're being silenced, and they're
Yeah.
locked into this, and then kind of start the shunning process. But so you wrote this, and you
Hmm.
wrote these books, and you continue to write. And are you going to get back to some of your art
Well,
as well,
so
like through painting
I
or?
would like to. What's kind of been crazy is as I was working on the Apostasy Trilogy, because I hire an editor for each book. I do all the steps a publishing house would do, but it really was a way to develop myself. And then I had an ex-Jehovah's Witness
Mhm.
filmmaker, Scott Holman, reach out to me, and he said, "Hey, I'd like to use your books as part of a crowd fund." And initially, I thought it was a scam, and I was really hesitant. But I said, "Well, I'll talk to you." And I, I decided to live very intentionally and be purposeful with everything, because for me, when I was without a car and rebuilding my credit and paying all this stuff, I went a year where I saw my son like once or twice, I think, and I barely made it through that year. It was horrifically painful. So I began documenting everything online. So because if I were to die from natural causes, I want my son to have that record and be able to find it and know that and be able to know me. That's very important to me. But so I was asked to be part of this crowd fund, and so we got Witness Underground released, and Scott gave me a producer credit on IMDb, and like I got to tell my little boy, "Hey, Daddy's a movie producer," you know,
Oh, that's great.
A- little awesome things like that, and then hell, like I kept having people reach out and say, "Well, how did you write a book?" Asking for advice. So I wrote an ebook and I published it on the day my father died as an homage. I wanted to make it free because like I said, he said it's important to help people. But Amazon made me, put it at 99 cents. But it's just kind of about my deconstruction and my writing process and how I kind of went from, one version of myself to another. And that was kind of like, well, that's a cap for that, right? Like the JW stuff. I've thrown my hat in the ring.
Yeah.
I've told my story, and
And I appreciate you coming back to tell your story.
yeah, thanks.
Well, I was gonna mention too,
Hmm.
the way you grew up, you probably were not used to that much praise.
No,
What's that like,
it,
So even someone going like, "Dude, you're great." It's like that's foreign.
it's extremely uncomfortable. I was conditioned to be abused, like Pavlov's dogs. When women are toxic, I'm drawn to them. I don't engage with anyone that makes me feel comfortable. Now, I'm not talking about, I'm going to go punch an alligator, but like lean into discomfort. I don't think you come out of a dysfunctional environment functional. And so I began like, and I have had, people like reach out for help. And it's crazy to me, honestly, because it's like, oh, I can encourage them, and like, and tell them, well, this is how I did it. And like, you want to be wary of these things. And so then, I mentioned a girl. I wrote her emo love poems. They're in my second book, right? So I messaged her to tell her, "Hey, I've published books and I was in a cult." She knew I was a Jehovah's Witness, and we've talked every day for like 2 years, and she's planning to come visit me in America. We video, so it's like the odds of us reconnect, and still getting along are crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I'm working on 3 books, which are all fictional. I wrote my son a children's book about critical thought and skepticism, and it's called "The Boy Who Loved a Monster," and it kind of rhymes like Dr. Seuss. I found another ex Jehovah's Witness to illustrate it. I do have like a GoFundMe, and I'm trying to save, but and some people have contributed, which is very lovely. But I'm also writing for this woman because she used to say we were twin flames. I'm writing her a horror romance about twin flames. And
I love it.
I'm also writing, I created a fictional religion called the Malachites. And every tenet is a logical fallacy about why I am God. And I'm going to warp that into a man comes out of fundamentalism and he feels like a lot of people have kind of made lateral moves, or they're in a new group, but they're defending it the same way. So he uses satire to create a religion, and then to his horror, people start being drawn to him, and he's trapped in this prison of his own design. And I want to tell the
Mm.
story with journal entries because, on one hand, he feels compelled to care for them, but on the other hand, he almost has contempt for them, you know. But I find it really fulfilling to work on these projects because it's fiction,
Yeah.
and it's liberating, and it's so exciting and fun. And then, like, even I've collaborated with people. I have a couple things in the works. It's just it's kind of had a snowball effect, and
It's
I
great.
because for so long I just tried to destroy myself. So I decided every day I'm going to do something to pursue my writing and just push the envelope and see how far it can go. And it's been the most fulfilling, exciting time of my life. And I did go through a lot of hell, but that's my origin story. It can't have been any other way. And I have been tested. I know when I'm left to die on the streets with
Hmm.
nothing, that I can come back and write books. And I don't say that to sound arrogant or cocky, but I feel very confident in who I am.
Some changes feel like chaos until they feel like freedom.
Yeah. Even like, my favorite singer, he for a time he stopped singing in front of the crowd. He would like go into the background or paint himself all black. Like, I don't like I enjoy one-on-one interactions, but as soon as you start getting people together, they sacrifice the beauty of the individual. And so
Definitely.
I don't like parties and all that, but yeah, I've connected with people from all over the world. One man sent me a picture of mentally diseased behind a Kingdom Hall sign, and it's just and I've been able to be there for people who have said, like, I just realized it's a cult. It's just, yeah, it's just been this beautiful healing thing. And I just, man, I just feel so grateful. And
That is the beauty, man. Like when you're able to be your true authentic self and realize that people resonate,
yeah, and
knowing that the way that you were raised and the way that others were raised, it was constantly saying, "Don't be yourself.
yeah,
Be this drone." And it's horrible. And I think it's beautiful, and it reminds me to mention that people will be listening to this. They will find this, whether it's a month from now, a year from now, and it'll be like, guys, you might have a tough struggle and a tough battle, but please endure
yeah,
and remember that you have your own voice, that you can get out there, you can make your own life what you want it to be. It's not going to be easy if you come out of a very controlling environment. These narcissists and these controlling people, that maybe use a religious framework to kind of do these things. But there are people like Micah out there that have endured such horrendous tragedies, and they get an opportunity to just shine, man. You're shining, you're glowing. And I'm just so grateful to talk with people that, yeah, life's not perfect.
yeah,
I've said it before, I've said it many times again. If you're alive on this planet, you've experienced wonderful and terrible.
yeah,
It's a cocktail.
yeah,
You can't just have one or the other. And your level of terrible may be more, it may be heavier than someone else's, but this ain't a game of comparison. This is a game of everyone's unique individual lived reality
yeah.
is going to be wonderful and terrible. And we just hope that over time the balancing scale gets you a little more wonderful, gets you a little more good. But sometimes you got to work through that shit to get there. I did want to ask you,
Mhm.
like with your writing, when you look back at what you've written, What surprises you about like your story and also like some of your writing? Like how has it evolved? It's kind of a two-parter.
So, I like the first poem I ever wrote. I have it tattooed in my own handwriting on my back. Some of them I remembered, some of them I didn't as much. But as I read through it, it was just very clear that I was struggling, and you know, uh, in a way, it was almost like my mother used to. I would show her my art, and she would tell me to throw it away, and I never could do that because it almost felt prescient. It was like I never told anyone because it felt crazy, but it was like I'm documenting something. I don't exactly know what.
Hmm.
And then it was like I found it, and it was like breadcrumbs I left back to who I am, you know.
Yeah, I love it.
And it
And by the way, too, you also dated yourself because your laptop didn't have the cloud on it.
oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But I and also like the thoroughness of how gutting everything was. I feel like it really just like removed so much toxicity because I was so devastated. I sat in this room and I thought I'm going to rebuild myself from scratch. And so I said, do I believe men and women are equal? Yes. Do I believe the races are equal? Yes. I I just brought myself down to nothing and rebuilt myself and lived intentionally. And even, I had this ring I used to wear. It reminded me of a day with my wife, ex-wife, right? And it was a super cool ring, almost $200. Threw it away. Threw away all my meeting clothes. I threw away everything because I realized I was wearing sadness. Now, because
Mm,
I would have my JW clothes and my cool clothes. I don't have a single article of clothing that I don't feel cool as fuck in, you know?
yep.
The thing about
Yeah,
authentic
there's a cognitive purge that people do. They may not realize that they do
yeah,
it, but there's a therapy in it and a weight release when you get rid of some of this shit. I threw all my suits away.
yeah, yeah. Somebody
You
told
know,
me sell them. They're nice. No, I don't want the money.
no,
I don't want a memory of spending the money. Yeah, let it go. And like it, I've slowly come back. I was slowly coming back to life, but then I am more alive than I have ever been. And it's just life has become about unlimited possibilities. I who knows what could happen or who could discover
yeah,
stuff, like I've accomplished more in 5 years, well, less than 5 years than I did, in all of that other time. And even now, like, I've improved my credit, I've paid off my debt, I'm hoping to move. I've met some great local JWs, I've met great people online. And the thing about authenticity is, you're right, it will draw people to you. But the other thing it does is it will push away the people you don't need. You know,
for sure.
I used to be so devastated when someone didn't like me or betrayed me. Now I'm happy. There are billions of people in the world, and you're a piece of garbage to me. So get on down
Yeah,
the road. I'll find people who are good to me. It's
yeah.
like,
We're
it,
out there.
yeah, it's so liberating. And then, like, what's crazy is I work at a bar, and most of the people I work with are in their 20s. Like some of them call me Unk, and I'm okay being,
Yeah.
I'm okay being avuncular. Um, but like some of them call me a legend. When I had people help me with photo shoots, I had them sign waivers so I can use the images in perpetuity. They signed them, no complaints. Photo shoots, multiple ones, for free. People wanted to help me and were excited to be a part of my art.
Well, I think that's also like people see authenticity
Yeah, could be.
and they see someone that is like, dude, you're real as fuck. Like you're real. And people are starved for realness. Even if there's a tent of like, I don't fully align with you, but like I respect it, man. And and also I think that there's when people realize I tell people, I don't tell everyone, but once I get to a point with people where I trust them, I tell them, my story
Yeah,
and they're like, damn, dude, like there is a grown level of respect where they realize what we come through, and I love hearing that echo in you as well,
yeah,
because it's great, man.
yeah. Well, and it's yeah, it's just it's been this amazing experience, and I mean, it's not over yet. It's like I'm just gonna keep pushing. You know,
Yeah, you're only getting started, man.
yeah, the best holiday tradition I have with my son is every Halloween we dress up and go see a movie. And I'm in my 40s dressed up in a theater. People are like, "Who is this crazy guy?" But like, I don't care.
We missed out on that.
Yeah, and it's like I get to love my son for who I don't have to worry about who he becomes, or like it's freedom. And I would wager too that I value and appreciate things more than the average person, because everything was soul sucking misery. When I
Hmm.
finish a book, I like to smoke a cigar.
Nice.
And like I know I enjoy that cigar more than anybody else around me,
Yeah, yeah.
because I know people who were shunned for decades for smoking. Just little
It's like
things.
after you're fasting for a while and you have that first meal, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this tastes so amazing.
Yeah, it imbues life with this sense of wonder, and it's like I remember years ago I got on Reddit and somebody said you'll reach a point where you'll be content with things and you won't wish it had been different. And I'm like, oh, this idiot. But they were right.
Yeah.
I can't believe
Yeah.
I've actually arrived in that place. And like, even if I died in 2 minutes, I would die knowing I would be fulfilled. There are still things I want to do, but like I'm content. I don't have to feel like I don't know. It's just, man, I feel really good.
That's a great place to be, man. I wanted to ask you some questions too about your art.
Yes.
Um, are there moments where your writing has helped you kind of notice? Like, do you have noticeable moments that recognize that you have like a real strength and resilience in you?
Um, so you know what? When 2 weeks ago I went to Boston to speak at this ex Jehovah's Witness convention, and I spent about 20 hours preparing a 15-minute speech. And as I spoke, you could have heard a pen drop, and I looked up and people were crying.
Hmm.
When I came down, this a woman whispered, "We love you." And then I had people come up to me. I've had people read my book who are ex Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're like, and they've told me I had it worse than them. I guess I didn't realize the severity of that because it's my story. But
Yeah.
you know, uh, but it's also, yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, I'm just a guy. Like, I don't feel like I'm, a leader or anything. I don't, even like when people, I have had some people almost like where it's not complimentary, it's almost like adoration. And it's like, no, no, no. Like, I mean, I appreciate your kind words, but like, I don't want to be, like, my thing is like a rising tide should lift all ships. I have had people tell me, like, you're a strong person. And even like acknowledging that almost kind of feels like arrogance, which I've had friends say, no, I mean, like, you are, so I kind of I try and accept it and engage with it. But yeah, like we talked about earlier, just like basic human decency, oh, it just feels overwhelming. Just like the absence of abuse and cruelty.
Yeah.
So, and even like I don't feel like the same person that wrote Mentally Diseased or any of those books. I really feel like I have changed and shed so much toxicity. I used to think that strength was power and aggression, but it's not. It's kindness,
Mm,
and it's I've worked so hard to
yeah.
do unlearning and deconstruction, and then just be like, who do I want to be? Like, what do I value? And like for me, I always wanted to tell horrifying stories with beautiful words,
Hmm.
but I had to tell my own first.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like I don't know. It's been this amazing experience.
It is truly harder. I feel like a natural reaction, especially coming out of a very traumatic childhood, is to just, well, lead with what works and is what has always worked. Anger, reaction.
Yeah,
And it is much more hard and hard to do, and requires a lot of strength and resilience to overcome, and to some extent rewrite your brain to have a different reaction.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
Easier said than done.
I think, well, I told you, like, in AA, they're telling me all these things that, like, they're telling me I don't care about people, and, I'm so selfish and all this stuff. And I just didn't feel that was true. I made mistakes, but it wasn't like I was indifferent. And so I just rebuilt myself on a few things. I knew I was plucky because I've done stand up and I know that's terrifying. I knew I loved art, and I knew I was driven because, like I said, I lost over 100 pounds, and it was like, no, kind of based on just those three positive things, I'm just gonna kind of try and move away from, just because what good is any of the rest of it?
Well, and we talked about it earlier, but your curse of awareness is turned into a strength.
Yeah.
You're eloquent in your speech and your thought process, and be able to write about topics that maybe fringe with an eloquent nature to it. That's what makes it work. It's not muddy. It's it's a craft.
Yeah.
And even just these early pages, I look forward to getting into some of the other writings of yours. You can tell that, like, there's some work behind that. So I'm excited to write that.
Yeah.
It makes me want to ask a follow-up question.
Hmm.
Like, does writing, like, as you've gone along in your journey of not only yourself, but your writing, um, is there a part of you that the writing has start to help make things make more sense? Like some of your life, has that kind of helped in your process just to, like, fully, like, unlock some things? Like, the more and more you write and you get your words out. I mean, they talked often about, like, how important it is to journal,
Yeah.
and how important it is to get your thoughts out. Has
So,
that helped also in your process?
yeah, like I said, like, mentally diseased is my origin story, right? And then gangrenous speeches is really like me reconnecting with my past. And
Yeah.
like and like I said, I remembered some of it, but I could engage with it authentically. And then despicable is like, all right, well, if you want to say I'm this evil antichrist agent of Satan, let's just write a book about the antichrist and I'll be on the cover as surrounded by friends covered in fake blood, and
Yeah.
it, it led to so much empowerment. I really feel like, for me, that trilogy was how I deconstructed.
Oh, it's great.
I mean, I went to therapy, three different therapists. I had EMDR, but I feel like the most cathartic thing for me was to write it and publish it, and then to have people reach out and tell me they connected with it. Because for me, I was the depressed kid with a dead father listening to songs, and I felt like that musician understood me. It almost seemed like they had written it about me. And
Mm.
I've had people say similar things to me. And that's just like, I mean, that feels more like religion and spirituality than anything I've ever experienced. I've just
Amazing.
always loved art because it can transcend barriers. And you have people talking about, the JWs in many forms, but and I know people write books, right? And I'm not denigrating anyone, but a lot of times it's like, I don't know, it seems like it's written for a JW audience. And when I worked with my editor, I said, "Now listen, I'm from the Matrix, so I need you to bridge the gap because a lot of this stuff, I don't, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
if XJWs read my trilogy or any of my books, that's amazing, and I'm grateful. But I didn't write it for them.
yeah.
I wrote it for outside readers because art can transcend barriers, and that's why I push so hard with my writing, because I feel like, if I'm confident in my art, and if I can get it out into this ether, and maybe my art can be used to reflect back at JWs, and that's not really a form that I see people attacking them on that front. So that's kind of what I feel like I guess I bring to the table.
Yeah, I think you have a very unique perspective, and I really look forward to just seeing your art over time. fully kind of get into that. Like, mentally diseased is your origin story to some extent, even though it's talking about your past.
Yeah.
And looking at these other works of art for you, I think is going to be great. I think it's great that you've chosen to still be a part of this XJW community. um and we talked about it, but it's just like, I don't know, you want to heal in your own way, and if healing in your own way means being a part of a community of X something, that's great.
Mhm.
I intentionally created this podcast for people like that. But there also is comfort in knowing, like, dude, I'm finding my own new group. I'm finding my own tribe. I'm
Yeah.
finding my people that
Yeah.
relate to my art, to relate in my taste in music and literature and movies and video games. And I think all that shit's great. So you find your tribe, your people. I think it's just amazing. Even if it's a tribe of one or two, it doesn't need to be this huge. We
Yeah.
grew up. We had so many people in our lives, and they were all pieces of shit. So if you find one or two people that are great, hold on to them.
I didn't know if anybody would read anything I'd ever written. I mean, I haven't sold, thousands or any, I'm not rich or anything from it, but just like that's just been overwhelming for me. And then even like that I get to meet my friend from the other side of the world.
Yeah, that's so
I just
awesome.
wanted to meet her so desperately. And, I didn't die. And after decades of hell, we reconnect, like it's almost like the universe has been giving me certain things back. It's just crazy, that it's all kind of from that one act where I just said I'm not going to self-destruct. I'm going to just pursue this, and it's led to all of these things I never thought would happen.
Well, and there is something powerful, and many parents will say this is, gosh, you have that child, it does change your perspective.
Yeah.
It really does give you a wake up call. Some rise to the challenge, like yourself. uh
Mhm.
and it really helps kind of chart a new path. Your child may not realize the strength that he had in just existing for you and your journey. But I did want to kind of close out here. I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat. I'm really, really,
Oh, me too.
really glad that we were able to connect. I see a kindred spirit in you in some way, that we've, while I haven't shared some of the tragedies that you've experienced. I've had my own fair share. And I probably, if I went to a con, I probably would also dress as a villain. So I can totally understand that. But is there anything that you're like, if you look back, and just even if you're looking back a day from now, much less years from today, that you're still learning to forgive about yourself and maybe in others that have kind of been in your journey in your own life course?
um I don't I accept everything about my past. It can't have been any other way. I acted the, I tried to be the best person I could in those environments. I mean, I made mistakes. It was a very dysfunctional one, but I was well intentioned, and life is about learning. For me, boundaries are very important. Actions should match words, and I am very intentional with my time and who I spend time with. And if people, treat me poorly, I have had people be insulting or even mock me, and yeah, I don't tolerate it. It's not about I'm going to fist fight them either. It's just like whether or not it's telling them to fuck off or just not talking to them anymore. I even work to try and make my mind a nice place to be. And, the things around me, things that I enjoy. And, just being in, you only get one life as far as we
Yeah,
know, right?
dude.
So why aren't you embracing your glorious life? Like,
Yeah.
you know, just, and I'm a minimalist too. I used to be fairly materialistic, but it's just like, why? What are you passionate about, man? That's what's beautiful about life, the connection with others who love what you love, and like being supported. no matter what crazy idea I come up with, I find people who
Yeah.
support me. And who would have ever thought, you know, because I truly was nothing in that organization.
Yeah. It's beautiful, man. Yeah. Your story comes with some weight to it, and I really hope, like I said, people read Mentally Diseased. And sometimes I'll have a chat with someone, and there's a level of like they're not quite there yet. They're
Yeah.
still got a ways to go. But it seems like with chatting with you, like you are in a good place now, and I look forward to maybe checking in with you down the line and just kind of seeing, maybe after a new book release or something,
Oh,
just where you're
definitely.
at on your journey. Um, yeah, I'm very grateful for you and grateful for your story, your message. You're a resilient dude, man. You're also humble, and that's a great combo.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you've worked really well at pushing down the ego, and
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I think that's important because in this environment, there are a lot of people that never had their power, and they'll just give it away so easily. So it's always nice when people say nice things about you, but I yeah, a rising tide should lift all ships. It should not be focused on one person because it may be my story, but it reflects all of ours, as yours
yeah,
reflects all of them. We have a commonality, and
yeah.
I really think we should be being kind to one another, and yeah, just hopefully, we keep improving.
Yeah, we will, man. Yeah, there is a growing community of ex Mormons and ex JWs and ex Scientologists and ex cult members
Yeah,
uh, that inhabit this space of like we're gonna be good, great people. We're
yeah,
gonna we're gonna learn from this bullshit. We're gonna move forward. It's not easy. There's some steps that happen where we take some steps back because life is challenging. But overall, like we're gonna be good, and we're gonna
yeah.
try to pass on this to the next generation and learn
Mhm.
from our parents' mistakes, and just be better overall. So I think in your way, you're helping lead that charge. So keep it up, buddy.
Will do. I
Where, as we close out, where can people find you online? Kind of let everyone know, because I'm sure people would love to follow up with you, because they'll resonate as well, and all that stuff.
totally. So I have a website, micahAllenLosh.com. Uh, that has a blog. It has links to my books, which are on Amazon, and it also has quite a few of my interviews. If people would like to check those out, it also has links to my threads, Instagram, and TikTok. I am active on Facebook. My Twitter is still up, but I was banned from Twitter. But there's several years of content on there if people would like to check that out. And I can also be Googled and a bunch of stuff will come up.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, thank you again so much, Micah. I really appreciate your time, and I know that the
Thank you.
people listening will really appreciate it as well. So look forward to chatting again with you down the road. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this journey in this era. If you found today's episode valuable, please share it with someone who might need it. Check the podcast description for our socials and other information.
Please consider supporting us at Patreon at patreon.com/culturepod. If you'd like to tell your story, please contact us at cult.chur.pod@gmail.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and stay free.